No Time to Die is definitely Daniel Craig's last James Bond film. And that's the most minor spoiler I think I can possibly say in this reaction video, so if that was too much for you, I'm sorry. It's been pretty obvious from the marketing, but having seen the film, it's 100% confirmed, and I'm gonna go much deeper than that. This is A Friend Reacts, and this is my thoughts on No Time to Die and the Daniel Craig era of the Bond franchise, which is, it's come to an end, it's over. And it's been, I've got mixed feelings about it. So, before we go to No Time to Die, and how it proves to me the entire Daniel Craig era has been obsessed with the 1967 Casino Royale film, the one film that was not made by the Broccolis and was produced by an independent company. The entire era has been obsessed by that, but I'll come to that with No Time to Die by going through the film sequentially. Well, first of all, I think in reaction to the shininess and the glibness and just how immaterial some elements of Die Another Day felt, it's not that I disliked Pierce Brosnan, he was a good actor, but the franchise needed to sort of toughen up, get more gritty. It didn't need to just imitate the Bourne franchise. And for Casino Royale, they sort of managed to hold that line. So yeah, they got the rights and the script to Casino Royale, the one film that the Broccolis hadn't done, and Daniel Craig was such a voice of fresh air. Casino Royale, really good film. It has some faults, it's not perfect, but everything from that really, rest in peace Chris Cornell, best theme song in the Bond franchise ever. Daniel Craig entered with such a self-assured start. This was a brand new movie that knew exactly what it wanted to do. And I was so let down because the setup was there. My one problem with Casino Royale is it doesn't quite feel like a Bond movie, it feels like an origin story. And just as the superhero franchise, I've got fed up of just seeing origin stories again and again and again. I just want to see these characters get into actually good storytelling, not see how they were recreated for the 10th reimagined time. And so Casino Royale worked really well, but what it really excited me for was the setup. It was, okay, Daniel Craig's different, where are they going to go from here? And that ability to pay off setup is the one thing that the Daniel Craig era has stumbled on. Quantum of Solace was an unmitigated disaster, and it didn't have to be. There was a really good idea there. There was a really strong and central narrative that they just, I suppose in retrospect we can thank the Hollywood writers' strike. The script wasn't finished, and if they'd held back, had a proper writer look at it when the strike finished, and then gone into filming, this could have been a very different story. The problem with Quantum of Solace is, underneath everything else, it does not explain why what's happening in the film matters. The idea that the bad guy is trying to fool everyone that they're a traditional oil baron, when actually they're saying the most important resource on the planet is water, and they're going to take charge of this country's water supplies, that's a brilliant plot twist, but the film's almost scared of it. Brush it under the carpet, don't talk about it. There are other issues with the film. The first director and the secondary director, so the difference between the action sequences and the conversations is starker than it's ever been before. It doesn't mesh as well as it should. So, in terms of payoff for what Casino Royale set up, Quantum of Solace really let me down. And then Skyfall. I adore that film. It's absolutely brilliant, but it's not... If someone said to me, what is the best film in the Bond franchise, I would probably point at Skyfall. But if someone said to me, what's the best Bond film to watch as a Bond movie, it can't be Skyfall. It's a bloody good film, it's not a good Bond film. And I know a lot of people who really took issue with that. They said it didn't feel true to the franchise. I really liked it, but I do understand, I do appreciate the differences. It was a beautiful send-off to Judi Dench's M. It was a really personal, heartfelt movie, and the action was gritty, but it finally separated itself from the Bourne franchise and started to feel like Bond again, feel like it had its own identity. Not the same identity of Sean Connery, Roger Moore and Timothy Dalton, but an identity nonetheless. And again, Skyfall, it sort of leant away from this quantum plot. It was good in its own merits. It didn't rely on the setup of the previous two films, which was a bit of a shame. It would have been nice to see Felix Leiter again. It would have been nice to see whether this guy really tied into the quantum subplot. But then Spectre leant back into that subplot, leant into it hard. The return of Mr. White was fantastic. The opening segments of the film are brilliant. I can't think of any movie that has disappointed me more in the second half than Spectre. It's all running so smoothly. It's got it's even managed to pick up the plots from the first two movies and run with them, and then it just throws everything in the bin. I'm not reviewing Spectre, but in short summary, there is a point towards the end of the film where they just suddenly go, oh, is that the time? We've only got 25 minutes left to wrap up this movie. Quickly, Bond, be a hero. There's a point where he's being tortured and he goes, right, I've had enough. It's time for me to save the day. And so he goes and saves the day. And you might think I'm being glib, of course that's what action movies done. It's never felt so blatant before. Bad guys need a secret base in Bond films. It's what always happens, it's part of the formula. And we'll get to the secret base in No Time to Die in a few minutes. But Blofeld, oh of course, they did the same trick that Star Trek Into Darkness did. This isn't Khan, it's a new character, and then when you watch the film, oh no, it's Khan. Everyone in the run-up to Spectre saw Christoph Waltz and said, oh, is he playing Blofeld? Is this Blofeld? Is this the return? Spectre's the film, is Blofeld in it? And all the directors, all the producers insisted, this isn't Blofeld, this is a new character called Oberhauser. And Oberhauser is Blofeld. It's just, if you're going to lie to the audience, do it more intelligently. And then when you have this massive plot twist that Blofeld and James Bond are brothers, yay, you recreated a plot twist of Austin Powers did 15 years earlier. A plot twist from a satire movie designed to take the piss out of James Bond. Well done for recreating that. I didn't buy into it for a second, and it wasn't built upon. There was about 30 seconds of payoff where Daniel Craig and Christopher Waltz look at each other and they're like smouldering intensity, and then it's gone. There's nothing you can pull from that. The plot isn't designed to reward the fact they're brothers. It's just a minor obtrusive detail that just ruins everything around it. But that's not the problem. The problem is after escaping from his torture scene, he just walks out of that secret, but there's nothing unique and special about Blofeld's base, and there's nothing unique and special about the way Daniel Craig and his companion escape from it. And then they return to London, just tell everyone Digby's the bad guy. Andrew Scott was being such a good villain for the first half of the movie, and then he's just thrown away because, oh, it's all about Blofeld. He's come back in a helicopter to get James Bond, and then he crashes the helicopter and he's captured. What a waste of the most central villain character in the entire Bond franchise. I've never been more let down by the second half of any movie after a pretty good build-up. With the news that this will be the 5th Daniel Craig movie, with the news that Christopher Waltz was probably returning as Blofeld, although there was back and forth on this. He said he would return if Craig did, then Craig confirmed he'd return, then Waltz said he wouldn't. Yeah, he is back. How can they actually tile this into a satisfying conclusion, having fumbled? Now, there's been really good elements of the Craig franchise. We've had good, unfinished, spellbindingly amazing, wasted potential. Is No Time to Die any good? I'm happy to say it is. It's really good. It's got some really good strong elements, and it ties back in not just the first 4 Daniel Craig films, but the entire Bond franchise. There's so many throwbacks, particularly, everyone will notice it because it's on the nose, on Her Majesty's Secret Service. The whole plot of James Bond wanting to marry and live happily ever after with his the love of his life, that's been done before. And at the time it was slated. But this franchise clearly has a lot of respect for George Lazenby and what he did with his one outing with the character. But the one association I would pull up from No Time to Die is with the Casino Royale 1967 film. So the Daniel Craig franchise started with remaking that movie but doing it properly, and it ends taking the plot from that movie. If you've never watched Casino Royale, and I do not recommend that you go and hunt it down, it's got all of the worst elements of the 1960s, but there's 2 elements from it that I would really pull out. The bad guy, the underhanded genius of the movie, which isn't Blofeld, it's a guy called Dr. Noah, is revealed at the end of the film to be Woody Allen. Okay, that's the actor, but he's James Bond's disaffected nephew who lives in disappointment of his family. So it's about a family dynamic and drama of someone related to James Bond absolutely fed up with the family legacy and turning against him. Oh yeah, hang on, that's what the new films have done with Blofeld. He's James Bond's brother who went to crime and used his skills in that area. And Dr. Noah's plan is to use biological warfare to turn people into living weapons. At the end of the film, he accidentally ingests an atomic pill that turns him into a living bomb. And he blows up at the end of the movie and kills everyone around him, including James Bond. Biological warfare. James Bond dies at the end of the movie after being infected by a biological weapon that turns someone into a living bomb that will kill targets. Spot, spot, spot. Other aspects of Casino Royale that the film really pulls on is James Bond is in retirement. He's actually quite an old gentleman who's gone through his years of service and is trying to get out of it, get away from the spy life. An MI6 that has tried to last beyond James Bond and found some new agents are really good and efficient and lethal, some of them are not, is actually a really important part of that 1967 movie. In there, it's actually a female agent who's replaced James Bond, who actually takes down Dr. No at the end, although it's not quite the perfect kill. The entire film ends in something of a satire of a tragedy. These are themes from that movie that, as I was watching No Time to Die, I just kept coming back to and going, they can't leave that film alone, can they? Some beautiful callbacks. But as for No Time to Die, what do I think of it? It's not as good as Skyfall, but it's better than Casino Royale. I'd put this as my second favourite Craig Bond film. And I think if you don't like those two films, then you probably will have issues with this one. It's certainly head and shoulders over Spectre. Unlike Spectre, after a decent build-up in the first half, it actually does manage to pay off what it set up. With the character of Madeleine Swann and Blofeld, it does tie together the full Craig era of the franchise into one neat bow. Q, Moneypenny, M. It's finally making use of that family dynamic it had set up at the end of Skyfall. There are so many things this film does right. The one question mark I have is over the villain. Safin himself isn't that intimidating in terms of his ability to be the big evil mastermind. His final confrontation with James Bond, and there are two minor confrontations which are both incredibly short, incredibly succinct, and in both of them, Daniel Craig clearly has the upper hand at almost all times, in terms of physical prowess. But Safin's not about brute force, he's about the insidious poisoner. He has contingencies. His very existence is a threat, not his ability to trade kicks or shoot guns. His nature means that everything around him has the potential to be poisoned, and that is handled really well. He is intimidating in other scenes. The very beginning of the movie, the cold open with Madeleine Swann under attack from this masked vigilante. You don't realise it's Madeleine until a few minutes in, but it becomes pretty apparent. That was a perfect opening to the movie, and it really set up a mystery, and it made me care about the character in a way that very little in Spectre ever actually did. Then the relationship between her and Bond, I was just waiting for her to come back into the film for it to really truly reignite. But Safin's presence and the Heracles plot, this is what Quantum of Solace didn't do. The villain in Quantum of Solace wasn't particularly intimidating, but they had a plot, they had a scheme. The problem is with that movie, it didn't clearly explain itself. No Time to Die explains itself perfectly. The plotting with the twist about Blofeld's party and Bond should have died, but there was a double cross from Safin. These two warring rival gangs of the underworld competing with James Bond caught in the middle, that was really well handled. Heracles itself, it's a beautiful, disgusting subplot. It's the kind of plot twist that a good Bond film should resolve around, and it raises all sorts of both physical in the moment questions, but also moral. If you really sit and think about it, this is scary. And the way it pays off, and they use that at the end, James Bond, he didn't have to die. But if he'd carried on, he would have been a potential living threat to his family. He would have been carrying this bioweapon with him, spreading it around the world, increasing the likelihood that he would come into contact with something that Madeleine Swann would then come into contact and ultimately kill his daughter. It's the way James Bond should go. He wasn't beaten down, he wasn't beaten by Safin. Instead, he used his last out of strength to stand tall over the corpse of his enemy, and took him out, and took his threat out with him. That's the way Bond should go. That was a good end to the film. But I come back to Safin himself as a villain at the end didn't have much to offer, but the contextual area around him was beautifully handled. The base, with the whole idea that unless they get those missile silo doors open, there's nothing they can do. It all revolved around the physical use of space. Open the doors. And again, that's a beautiful Craig back to the last Connery film, where they had to open the volcano doors so the army could come down and take out Blofeld. But it's that awareness of the space. In every moment through the final infiltration of Safin's base, I had a very clear image in mind of where the characters were and what each of them doing, except for when the film deliberately didn't want you to know where they were. My only sort of question is that the daughter got away from Safin and back to Bond and Madeleine just a little bit too easy. She basically escaped 1 second, then was seen in a completely different location being reunited with her mother. Yeah, okay, the movie had made a plot point of she's taught to hide because of her mother's experience when she was a young age, hiding from Safin himself. So yeah, I can. It doesn't ruin anything, but that is the only weakness I can pick in that part of the film. So many plot pieces done, set pieces done right. The bit in the shrubbery in the forest with the mist, with the cars coming to hunt down Bond, Madeline's daughter. I felt like I was watching the best bit of a Jurassic Park movie. I honestly wouldn't have been shocked if a velociraptor had come charging out of the mist. I'm glad it didn't. It would have rather ruined the Bond franchise. But there's just so many parts of No Time to Die that just worked, and very few things that didn't. So when I stand back and look at the Daniel Craig era, it's 3 out of 5. 3 swinging hits, 2 misses. It's not bad odds, and they're not the worst movies in the world. They're just really pale in comparison to the ones that stand above them. So I'd recommend this movie in a heartbeat. I'd recommend everything it does. Does it deserve over 2.5 hours runtime? Possibly not. I don't know what I'd cut though. I've seen people saying they'd cut some of Safin's scenes, but no. If you cut his scenes, he wouldn't work as a villain. If you cut down his backstory, his insidious nature would have been diminished. He doesn't work as a villain in a moment. His confrontation with James Bond was pathetically short. What mattered was his character and the impact it had on other characters. It was his nature that was his threat, not his ability to punch Bond in the face. So if you cut down his scenes, you'd lose some of that threat. Would you cut down the middle bit when it's trying to get Blofeld to talk? No, because that's what tied the whole franchise together. And it was the way Safin brought Blofeld down that explained the way that Heracles worked. It explained the danger. It made Bond's choice at the end of the movie make so much sense. When all you need to do is hold one person's hand and then touch someone else to spread death, you're going to have to think very, very carefully. When I cut the opening scenes with Bond's retirement and then his trip to Cuba, no, Paloma was brilliant. And it's a shame that I think they're going to do a hard reset. Probably Ben Whishaw said as Q, he thinks his time on the franchise is done. He had a contract for 3 films, he's achieved them. This Q, this Moneypenny, they're so intrinsically linked to Daniel Craig's Bond. This Mallory, this M, is linked to Craig's Bond. Felix Leiter is gone. So the only character I'd love to see again is Paloma, but when everything else in the movie is so clearly going to have a hard reset at the end, that bringing her back would just be awkward. Oh, I wish we would have seen more of her. But I wouldn't cut anything. It's a good film. If you haven't seen it, hope you've enjoyed these spoilers. If you have seen it, please leave some comments below. Let me know what you thought. I've had a really good weekend reflecting on this film.